Well, hi there. Welcome to the BDR Net video channel. If you would, click on the little subscribe button below. And if you click on the little bell thing, it will let you know when new videos are posted. Thanks. Be happy to announce that today we are very pleased to have Tim Schott, meteorologist and the AFS Dissemination Mission Support Team head from the National Weather Service, Daniel Burke, the warning coordinator meteorologist from the National Weather Service in Las Vegas, Nevada, Wayne Hart, who is a consultant to the Weather Service on National Weather Radio, and Adrian Abbott, who is the Nevada EAS chair. And our topic today is primarily going to focus on something the Weather Service has now done to make their alerts more cogent and effective. And then we'll have some time perhaps to ask some other questions if you want. But I'm going to turn the floor over now to Tim Schott and get started.
Thank you, Barry, and thank you everyone for allowing us to be part of this forum today. We really do appreciate the opportunity. Very briefly, myself, I've been in the field of meteorology for 36 years, both in the private sector and for the Air Force, and now with the nation's National Weather Service. For the past 7 years, I've been working on dissemination services issues. And I would say, looking over my career of 36 years, this position is the most important one I've held, because if our information does not reach our public in a manner that we would like, so they can take appropriate action when there is a tornado or there is a flash flood, we've let our public down. And I would say this project, for a more targeted delivery of our warnings to the public through No Weather Radio and through commercial radio and television, is the most important one that I've worked on over these past several years. But this has been a team effort, and I just want to briefly introduce the members of the team and let them say something to everybody. I think everybody knows Ms. Adrian Abbott, but let me turn the floor over to her for a moment.
Thank you, Tim. This has been quite the project. A little bit about my background. My dad was a ham radio operator, so there you have it. I had a ham license at 12. I was doing high school radio at 16. I got my first FCC license in college, progressed from there up to my first, which has been now downgraded to a general. I've been a technical writer. I've been a radio technician. I've been a chief engineer at radio station. I've been a news reporter. I've been a news director. I've been an assignment editor for television station. And I spent the last few years working as a inspector for the alternate broadcast inspection program at the Nevada Broadcasters Association. So I've kind of seen a lot of stuff from a lot of different angles, sort of jack of all trades and master of none. But that's my background. That's kind of how I got here.
Dan, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, I'm Dan Burke. My title is Warning Coordination Meteorologist here at the National Weather Service in Las Vegas. I've been with the National Weather Service for 14 years now and spent the last 8.5 of them here in Las Vegas. And my primary job is to be the liaison between our local Weather Service office and our partners, including the media, the broadcast engineering community, the law enforcement community, emergency management, politicians, whoever wants to come talk to the Weather Service in Las Vegas, they come to me first.
Thanks, Dan. Mr. Wayne Hart, would you like to say a few words?
I can. First, can you hear me? I entered late. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. My name is Wayne Hart. I've been with the Weather Service since 1987. I spent 20 years of that time as chief engineer on the NOAA Weather Radio Network, taking it through tube technology to solid state technology. And over those years and subsequently, about 9 years after retirement as a contract consultant. I've gone from 250 stations on the network to we now have 1,033 NOAA weather radio stations on the air. So my interest for all that time was the development of the network, broader location, maintenance of the network, and dealing with the conversion to the solid state, and going through 4 different solid state transmitter manufacturers and all the contracting woes for doing that. So I'm here today to answer any technical questions that you might have involving our presentation today and anything else on NOAA Weather Radio, specifically the transmitter networks.
All right, thanks, Wayne. So cycle back to April of 2015. That was the first NAB show that I attended in my role as Dissemination Services Manager. And I will say that I received quite an earful there, that the interface of National Weather Service warnings with the emergency alert system was not working very well, and that something needed to change. But I am happy to say 6 years later that the Weather Service did listen. Your feedback was very important, and we would not be here, and this project would not have reached the current point had you not spoken up. So we appreciate this partnership. And before we get into more details, I want to emphasize that we, the National Weather Service, we are not doing this autonomously. This is not just a National Weather Service initiative. Each of you are essential and important stakeholders to this improvement that we're taking. This improvement is not for the entire nation. This improvement is not for every county, but we think that this improvement does bear promise for select counties. And what those select counties are, we'll get into some more details here as we get into the presentation. Adrian, did you want to add a few words on the topic of broadcast versus pinpoint?
I kind of thought it would be important to bring out that contrast, because what this project is the bringing together of 2 different cultures. The Weather Service over the years has become very good, very adept at pinpointing a storm, what it's doing, where it's going, where it's expected to go, and then issuing the appropriate warnings. So pinpointing, targeting, that's the Weather Service culture. That's their goal, to be able to tell you that storm is going to hit you in 15 minutes. You need to take shelter now. Broadcast, on the other hand, is the entirely opposite situation. We love our coverage maps. We love to say, oh yeah, my signal reached all the way to Elko, or I followed your station all the way down to Tonopah, which is halfway between Reno and Las Vegas. So we're kind of the opposite. We have all this geography and all these people. So as the Weather Service project of targeting, forecasting improved, it became more and more of a burden on us as broadcasters to get information to the public that might not apply to 2/3 of the people in our coverage area. So it got to the point where a lot of broadcasters were saying, I'm not doing this anymore. Activations getting 11 activations in a 2-hour period in a monsoon afternoon here is just not acceptable. So we started talking about what our options were. And I think at this 2015 NAB meeting, the question came up of, well, that whole thing was subdividing in part 11, and people said, well, we can't divide. For example, we picked Clark County because that's where we were, and the weather service forecasts and warnings were a particular problem in Clark County. And people were saying, well, we can't divide it into 9 little squares. It's not square to begin with, and blah, blah, blah. And so finally, the question was asked, well, does it have to be 9 little squares that are all equal? And what can we do? Can we really use this? And between Tim and Dan and Wayne, we came up with the answer, which was, yeah, we can divide the county up any way we want. Little did we know that this was going to result in such a fundamental shift, I guess, or tsunami-inducing situation at the Weather Service where they had to rewrite a whole bunch of stuff to get us to this point. But thanks to Tim and Dan and Wayne, we were able to get this through, and we now have more of a subdivisions of Clark County that will enable the stations to say, well, we don't want that warning and we don't need that warning, and we cover this area, so we'll take that warning. So we will be able to pull in what applies to us and let the other stuff go. And the other stations on the edges of the population center of Las Vegas, they'll be able to say, well, we don't need to know what's happening in downtown Las Vegas, but by gosh, we need to know what's happening in our area. So that's where we're at today. And all I can say is, thank goodness we've got people like Tim and Wayne and Dan at the Weather Service who listened to our stupid questions and made sense of everything, and now we've made it work.
Thanks, Adrian. That's good background information. And what my goal is, and what our goal is here today, is we're going to be showcasing the effort as a great example of what is happening for Clark County. And I'll also talk about what we are planning to do with our other Weather Service offices for select counties as we go forward. Like I said, I think we've got very important partners here. If you look at the example of Sonoma County, I mean, let's face it, AM radio and NOAA weather radio, they were the last men standing when, Armageddon struck and those terrible fires struck that county. And very coincidentally, the Sonoma County Office of Emergency Management is seriously looking into the potential partitioning of Sonoma County for NWR and EAS, and our warning coordination meteorologist there is involved with those conversations. So if we could move on to the next slide here, one which says partial county alerting history. So the first question you may be asking on the second slide, where it says partial county alerting history, is, well, where did this phrase partial county alerting come from? Gee, I'm familiar with part 11 and I only read about the word subdivisions in part 11. Well, this was a conversation that the Weather Service had with our Office of Communications and also our social scientists on board. And we saw this word in part 11 of subdivisions. One of the challenges we had with the use of the word subdivisions is that in many parts of the nation, subdivisions refer to specific tracts of housing. And what we were doing didn't correspond to a tract of housing. The other thing that the Office of Communications shared with us is that it would be good to have a common phrase as both the noun, which is partial county, and the action, which is partial county alerting. And we sort of went round and round, and we also discussed it with Adrian and Dan, and we came up with the terminology and an initiative using partial county alerting, and the acronym is PCA. I had a conversation with Greg Cook at the Federal Communications Commission about this. I said, would there be any objection from the FCC as we move forward with this rollout if we use the phrase partial county or partial county alerting while fully respecting the FCC's use of the terminology subdivision? And he said he didn't see any problem with us adopting the use of the phrase partial county alerting. And he said anything that would help to improve the fundamental operations and effectiveness of the EAS would be fine with the FCC. And so we've run with it, partial county alerting. As Adrian specifically mentioned, the Weather Service implemented a warning system known as Warning by Polygon around 2007. So we've been in it now for 14 years. And she's correct, whereby our warnings are defined using polygons, a more pinpoint approach to where the hazard is located. And yet, from the point of view of the National Weather Service with NOAA Weather Radio, since the NOAA Weather Radio specific area message encoding protocol is generally county-based and EAS is county-based, yes, from the period of 2007 through 2015, when I attended my first NAB meeting, it was clear that there was too much overwarning going as far as aerial coverage of warning and the number of warnings. When I checked back with our Weather Service offices, I found out that there were 4 of our offices, Duluth, Glasgow, Montana, Rapid City, and Tucson, that had been using partitioning, as they called it, since approximately 2001. They were using a local application, and I'll give an example from the Rapid City office of what they're doing as of now. But these were local applications. They were not baselined in our national computer system, and we have 122 offices on our national computer system. In talking more with these existing 4 weather forecast offices, it became clear that the partial county alerting, which they were successfully using, could address overwarning in a number of situations, to include counties that are large, counties that are elongated north-south or east-west, counties with non-contiguous sections, such as those with islands, such as in Hawaii, counties with distinct population centers, those with very distinct climate zones within the county, and also counties that are served by multiple media markets. And I think as we go forward, we may find other county-specific characteristics that may lend themselves to successful employment of partial county alerting. So going into the Part 11 in the EAS protocol, as Adrian said, the Part 11 rules allow for the division of a county into a maximum of 9 subdivisions or 9 partitions. The Part 11 rules are very specific, and they say that any subdivisions must be defined and agreed to by local officials prior to use. And I again repeat what I had said earlier. We're not doing this autonomously. We know that any effort for the employment of partitioning requires a very robust conversation with broadcasters and local officials and emergency managers. And it's a team effort, and the Weather Service is not stepping off on our own to do this. I also would like to say, and Wayne may have more to add a little later in the hour, that Wayne has done an extensive outreach effort. Wayne has spoken with our EAS encoder decoder manufacturers, and he's also reached out to our NWR receiver manufacturers. And I think we can pretty confidently say that for both EAS and for NWR, all the ingredients for doing this successfully and all the technical requirements for doing this are in our existing NWR and EAS toolkits. And this is simply a capability that's been baked into EAS that we haven't used, and we're stepping off now to employ and to use it. Moving on to the next slide, this is the example from Pennington County, South Dakota, which is served by our Rapid City, South Dakota office. They've had tremendous success with several counties in South Dakota in the use of partial county alerting. In this graphic, we have a elongated west to east county. Rapid City, which is the main population center, is part of the central partition. In this example, there's a severe thunderstorm warning, a severe thunderstorm moving into the west partition of Pennington County. And in this manner, the warning is not disseminated through EAS or NWR same to the residents located in the central partition, which is the population center for the specific county. So next, we're going to move on and showcase the wonderful efforts that have been undertaken in Clark County, and Adrian and Dan have been very involved with this for a period of time, and I'll let Dan take it from here.
All right, thanks, Tim. I just want to, I covered some things that have already been covered just to show some context here with how they're being applied in Clark County. As Adrian was talking about, this is and Tim, this prior to 2007, any kind of severe weather, in this case a flash flood warning, was issued for the county, we would be alerting the entire county, and the warning would be issued for the entire county. In this case, we imagine that a storm is affecting this portion of the south central Clark County, and now we will issue for just this portion. Now, prior to 2007, we would only issue one warning for however many storms would be in the county. The particular problem we have in Clark County is its size. It's over 8,000 square miles. It's one of the top 10 largest counties in the country, or 11th or 12th. It's very close. And our problem was before we would issue a warning for the entire county, but there was no context to it. You could be, is it people in Las Vegas would go outside and say, it's absolutely clear, there's nothing going on here, but you're warning me for a flash flood warning that isn't happening, when in fact it is happening in another portion of the county. So in 2007, we started issuing by polygon. So in this case, we would issue this polygon warning for where we think the effects of the flash flood will occur. However, through EAS, which is our primary mode of dissemination to the public to put out these warnings, we're still communicating for the entire county because our FIPS codes are formatted as such. Next slide, please. So this is what we came up with for the partitioning of Clark County. We've partitioned it into six partitions, whereas the main population center is right in the center with the partition with the leading digit of 5. Now, when we were talking earlier and you saw the box with the 9, like the 10 key with the 9 numbers on it, we're not required to use each of those numbers, so we don't need to have 9 partitions. However, we are required to use the designation for each one. For example, the one with the leading 1 is going to be designated Northwest Clark County. No, the one with the leading county leading number of 8 is going to be South Clark County, Southern Clark County, and as such with the directions. So we set this up to just eliminate partition 2, 7, and 9, and use these as the directional components for this county. 2 million people live in just Partition 5, and 1/10 of that many live in the rest of the county. So you can see why we were kind of concerned about making sure that not too many people were warned for warnings outside of the Las Vegas Valley and vice versa. Next one, please. And here's the example. After June 1st, well, when this is going to be implemented, we'll go live. Flash flood warning or a tornado warning or a severe thunderstorm warning, any EAS activation that goes out for a single partition will only be programmed to activate EAS for that partition. Now, any radio, TV station, anyone who's listening for a particular partition is only going to activate when those partitions are set. Or otherwise they will be activated for the entire county as always was. So any station programmed only to pick up the partition 8 in this case will activate. And if you have a station whose broadcast footprint does not include that, you can program your equipment to not activate for this partition. Next slide, please. Here's an example of how it might be used. Now, here are two stations on the left map here that are identified as KJUL and KCNB, and their locations and their respective broadcast footprints. Now, we had a tremendous flash flood, as you can see in some of the pictures to the right, where as the flash flood took out, we got 4 inches of rain in a matter of a couple hours, which is a year's worth of rain here in the desert. So it's a year's worth of rain in just a couple of hours, and it caused tremendous flooding and actually washed out the interstate. And actually the place that it washed out the interstate was up near that thumbtack there for KJUL in Moapa, Nevada, in far northeast Clark County. Now, in this case, we issued the warning, we updated it, we had a flash flood emergency for the area. But as is the case, we alerted the entire county for this, when really the only locations affected by the storm were up in that partition 3. So in this case, KCNV would have no reason to be programmed to alert for partition 3 or 6 for that matter, or maybe even 1. So they could decide to only activate for the partition 4, 5, and maybe 8 here. And if that were the case, their listeners would not have their broadcast interrupted for the warning going on up in Moapa in the northeast part of the county. On the flip side, the KJUL would be activating for that, and perhaps might not activate for any storm that would be coming through other parts of the county. Okay, next slide, please. So as a part of this, we're conducting a public education campaign, and we have a website set up for it. There's a fact sheet from the Office of Communications, and we're developing YouTube videos for NWR users and the public and broadcasters. We're going to pass this off to the media. A portion of that video is already prepared and available. We're going to put it out on social media and link to the videos that we put out. We're going to have a broadcaster-specific fact sheet that we're still working on right now, and that's going to be available for the broadcasters, the media end, and the broadcast engineers to kind of explain what we're doing on the technical end. And a targeted webinar with the media. We're going to work with the on-air TV meteorologists and the reporters to let them know what's going on and why we're doing this and all this, so they can help amplify the message. We're doing congressional notifications. There's going to be a big news release with the weather from our weather headquarters, public service announcements coming out over NWR, and key messages and future outreach events with partners and stakeholders. So when we have outreach events in larger groups, which of course we've not had a whole lot recently due to COVID. We'll be amplifying the message through those as well. And I'm going to pass it now back to Tim.
Thanks, Dan,
For the next one.
and thanks for all the great work that's underway in Clark County. And this June 1st is not a single moment in time. That's when this will begin. But going forward, as Dan said, there will need to be, and there will be, an effective education campaign to inform the public about these changes that are underway. And I guess a neat aspect of partial county alerting is that there will be a more targeted, improved delivery of information to the public through the emergency alert system. And the public may not even be aware of the improvement in the service delivery, but it is something that is going to happen. Another interesting aspect about it from the No Weather Radio side is we will encourage people to make changes and enter the new codes into their NWR receivers. However, if somebody doesn't do that, there will be no degradation of service. They'll continue receiving all the warnings as they had before. So moving on to the next slide, what are the next steps as the Weather Service and all of us move forward on this? Weather Service, by late summer or fall, we will go out with a public comment period. It's a requirement that we must follow before effecting any change in the Weather Service. And we're going to go forward and we're going to say, now that this has been implemented in Clark County, we would like to, on a, select county basis, implement this change for other counties across the United States. What do you all think about this? What do you not like about this? So we'll have, for 30 to 60 days, we'll have a public comment period. Hopefully the feedback from that will be positive. And if in fact it is positive, then the final decision will be made to execute and move forward, whereby our national computer system used by our 122 weather forecast offices will have the capability for using partial county alerting. We expect that system will be updated and in place with our national software baseline by early 2023. And then even more than that, what we will do is, if an office, along with their county stakeholders and broadcasters, is thinking about implementing partial county alerting, we're going to recommend that those offices also do their own public comment period to find out if the proposed partition boundaries are adequate, or maybe they need to be massaged and moved, or if there are any other unknown problems that need to be brought to the attention of the broadcasters and the National Weather Service. So at each step of the way, for each proposed implementation, the Weather Service's door is open for comments and feedback. And again, I emphasize that we will not go ahead and make these changes autonomously. It'll be a full group effort before a final decision is made on implementing partial county alerting for a given county. Wayne, did you want to add any other technical notes or points at this particular point in the presentation?
No, I don't think I have anything at this point to add, but I will be available for specific questions.
Okay. All right. Adrian, would you like to add some words about possible next steps across the broadcasting community?
Well, we've already here in Nevada, if you look at the state and our large counties, I've already made contact with a couple of people at the Weather Service about a similar project for other counties with this same situation. It's I think going to be a great solution for us. I think it's important, if you're more in the emergency management frame of mind, to understand that there's not a blackout on this information, that if you're a radio station or TV station, and you're not broadcasting these EAS activations, you can still take in that information. That information is still available. It gives the station the option of, rather than doing the EAS activation, of actually putting this information out as part of the newscast, or even in the course of normal programming, where we still have live DJs and real radio, or for television, you have the reporter on the scene covering this particular emergency. You have the option of not interrupting that report with an emergency message. So I think it's a much more broadcast friendly approach. Wayne is being kind of shy in that he was very critical in this process, because he contacted the vendors, the manufacturers of the EAS equipment that is used in Clark County specifically, contacted each vendor and verified that their equipment can be programmed with these new codes, with the actual, 5 or 8 or 9 digit in front where there is a 0 now, that would accommodate this new program, and the EAS equipment would do exactly what we wanted it to do. And that for people who did not want to incorporate this change, but rather broadcast everything, that they would still be able to receive all activations. So Wayne played quite an important part in getting all this done.
Indeed, indeed he did. Thank you, Adrian. So Barry, there you have it. This is our story. This is where things are going, and we'd love to hear any comments or questions.
Okay, that's good. I'll leave this up for just a couple of moments for anyone that wants to copy down these particular addresses for questions. Anyone in the floor here have a question right now about the partial county activation?
Yes, yes. So then, as far as the EAS equipment, do we actually program the event codes differently then? Instead, for example, a tornado warning for the whole county, it'd be a tornado warning for whatever part of that county it happens to be in. And is that going to be by, do you guys do it by name or by number?
It's depends on the EAS box. Generally speaking, your EAS boxes, when you program them for the county, it comes up with the county name.
Yes.
And then there normally is an expansion from that to say, okay, this county has partitions. Do you want to name the partitions under that county? And depending on the box, it'll either include those partitions, or since you know what partitions exist because you've seen the information from the Weather Service, and the 6-digit code, what I call a pseudo FIPS code, then that is probably be the code that you would enter in on that list that you want to be alerted or alarmed for that one partition or more. Realizing that all events will not always go to partition. Each forecast office will be deciding for what events they will use partitioning. I believe in the case of Las Vegas, for example, they'll use partitioning for tornado warning. They won't use partitioning for winter storm watch because it's too broad. But does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Any other questions from the floor?
I have one, if you don't mind, Barry.
Please.
Well, where we are located, I guess, at our group of stations, we monitor our EAS monitors two of the NOAA weather radios. It works well for our full coverage area. There are times that, like for one of our counties, Nelson, it'll go over both that we're monitoring, and that's where our duplicate alerts come from. Does this and the reason the duplicate alerts happen is because both weather radio stations, they only send out the FIPS code for the area they're covering, hence we get double alerts since the FIPS codes are different. Does this partial county adjust that a little bit so maybe we're not getting it double alerts?
I would say it's going to be a mixed message. One thing that the forecast office looks at is the coverage of the NOAA weather radio broadcast. And if that coverage of a NOAA weather radio broadcast station includes the county, those warnings for the entire county will go off over that station, and any other station that basically touches that county. But if you got two NOAA weather radio stations and they cover different parts of the county, then you got the chance that you may hear over one that covers that partition, but it would not be sent over the other one, which does not cover that partition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that answers my question. It's just planning on our part because, again, we get quite a lot of double alerts where it'll trigger one, and then after that EAS message is done, it'll go ahead and send the message out, the same message out from the other one. So I think, no, that answers my question pretty well. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'll kind of ask a little bit further on where Jeremy was. It wouldn't affect my area necessarily, but if you have two weather service radios sending out the alert, we're going to have two different ID codes, are we not? Which is what partially contributes to the duplication.
Yeah, basically, because the one weather radio, I guess to kind of answer a little bit more how it works for us. So the one weather radio, like it'll have let's say Ramsey and Nelson, and then the other one we're monitoring just has Nelson and something else. So because of the two Nelsons, because of the FIPS code in the message is different, it treats it as two separate messages instead of marking one as a duplicate.
I understand. Yes, that's true.
I'm going to resist the temptation to discuss a half Nelson and full Nelson, but
I just picked the name of a couple of our counties just as an example.
But is this something that the Weather Service could eventually put together when an alert goes out over two different NWRs, that the way it's done, they could coordinate the codes?
I think if the counties are partitioned, it lends itself towards more granularity, and it would, I think, decrease the chances of duplicate alerts. As Wayne said, and as Dan can say, along with Adrian, as one part of the partitioning for Clark County, they did carefully look at the broadcast footprints of the NWR transmitters.
I see, Bill, you unmuted yourself. Got something to say for us?
Yes, I was going to comment on two things. Number one, to Tim's point, and perhaps answering Jeremy's question, if Nelson County were partitioned, that would help, because let's say you had Eastern Nelson County and Western Nelson County, and if those were set up separately, you might see them appear differently. In essence, the devices would react because they would see them as different FIPS codes. So there could be some stuff here. I did want to just overall comment that being an EAS equipment manufacturer, I heartily support this effort and the work that you guys have done on this thing. It's something that has been sorely missing, and a lot of people just didn't understand that you could do this. And without the coordination and everybody to start from the originating side with NWS doing the origination and understanding how to set up these partial counties types of things, this is outstanding work. And I really appreciate the effort, because I think it's going to truly improve the whole methodology and the means in which we can better communicate.
If I can add, we have a great deal of interest from Clark County Emergency Management, because again, they're facing the same situation. Sometimes the emergencies occur right in the middle of town. For example, the 1 October event, which was so horrible. And they had considered an EAS activation to keep people away from town, keep them from coming into the strip in that area. Things where they don't need to have the entire county informed, something that happens up in the Moapa and Mesquite area. People in Las Vegas, you know, when we have these weather warnings, are constantly saying, it's sunny and clear here, you know. Why do I care about an explosion at a fireworks plant in Mesquite? So it's helpful, not just as a tool for the Weather Service, but also for the emergency management agencies.
Good. Tim, tell me if this is, you've got 4 counties, or obviously a 5th one with Nevada. When are you going to be reaching out to the different counties, or do you have a particular plan? Do you want them to come to you? Do you have a schedule?
Yeah. What would work best is for folks, to broadcasters, emergency management officials, county officials, to reach out to their local warning coordination meteorologist. Dan is the warning coordination meteorologist for the Las Vegas Weather Forecast Office. But each one of our 122 weather forecast offices has a Dan, has a warning coordination meteorologist, and that would be the person that they would begin the conversation with, because this is a local initiative and a local effort. Now, once I hear about it, then I can bring in Wayne Hart and folks from our national team, and we'll work with the Weather Forecast Office on a potential implementation. Now, we do have, you know, we're planning for a national software baseline in early 2023. And so as I've spoken with our warning coordination meteorologists, now's the time to start stirring the pot, begin these conversations, because if folks want to get in for this early 2023 implementation, now's the time to begin the conversations. I'm sure that Adrian and Dan can attest to the fact that that graphic and those 6 partitions, it took quite some time and a lot of discussions for it to evolve into that final form. And it's that type of an evolutionary process that will be required for any counties going forward. Adrian, I don't know if you want to add a word about the fact that, you know, it took time.
It did. It took time. It took some research, but also, in one sense, it came together pretty easily, because there's a geographic factor, there's a center of population, and then the other factors all had to be considered. So I think the time came in figuring out where to draw the lines and looking at some of the past weather disasters, how those had morphed through, and again, taking into account the broadcast footprints and so forth. So it takes time, but it's not it's not difficult. It's just a matter of, you know, bringing the data together and looking at things like geography and coverage maps and weather in the past and so forth. So it's not an impossible task. It's just thinking back when we started all this, who knew that, for example, the Weather Service is going to have to write an entirely new computer program for this. So yeah, 2023 sounds like a long time away, but start now, start knocking on the doors, particularly where you've got counties like this with, it doesn't have to be as big as Clark County. I know Richard Rudman talks about San Bernardino, which is the biggest county in the country. You know, start now, because getting all this work done, this process done now before that program becomes available, you'll be ready to go in 2023. You won't be delayed by having to do the homework first. Do it now and you can present it to the Weather Service and the emergency management community, and you're done, you're ready to go. It's off and running.
Tim, you
Thanks.
mentioned how many offices now?
We have 122 weather forecast offices. And so if folks on the call have interest in this, you may not know who your local WCM is, contact me and I'll get you in touch with the local office.
I was going to say, is there a way to do this off your website? Does that help?
It does. If one goes to, it picks an area and clicks on an area and goes to a local weather forecast office, they should be able to drill down and get the name of their, that office's WCM.
Can you guide me through it here?
Yeah, let's say if you go to Dan's office, if you go to the Las Vegas office, Dan, I'm pretty sure if you drill down through your website, your name is in there.
Actually, I'm going to make it easier for you. There's a
Okay.
one-stop shop for all of this.
Oh, okay. Where?
Go to weather.gov/stormready.
Okay.
Okay. You want this? Okay. /storm ready.
Yeah. This is another one of our programs that we do for communities, but there's a nice, easy way to get your WCM. If you click on that bottom link on the right, get more information,
Okay.
you'll get a map. And then once you click Nevada there, and you'll see these are the areas of responsibility, and the contact information there is for WCM. That's the WCM for that area. My name will show up on those for California and Arizona as well, because we cover a portion of those states. But if you just click on whatever state you're interested in, that will show you the meteorologists, warning coordination meteorologists in all of those states
All right.
with a phone number and email address.
Excellent. Very good. Any more questions about the PCA?
Just a quick one. Adrian, I trust that we'll see some of this also blended into the state EAS plans?
Yes, we are currently working on an update to our EAS plan, and it will show up under the section where we offer information for stations in programming their EAS equipment.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. Tim, anybody has a question about PCA, we're still there, but let me widen out just a little bit. I shared with you an audio clip. One fellow that sent it to me is online with us right now. And the question becomes, is there anything you can do or you can recommend if the audio quality is not what it should be, or cooperation locally could be better? Do you want them to come to you, or is there a better direction?
Sure, I can answer that in two parts. First of all, if a conversation has been initiated and the response from our weather forecast office is, let's say, not as robust as you would like, I would appreciate if folks would come to me, and I think I can sort of facilitate things and bring it to a better place for everybody involved. On the specific question or example that you posed about the audio quality, I think that Wayne Hart might have some additional information to share with us.
Well, I listened to that example, and yeah, quite a bit of background noise. I don't recall whether you mentioned that was the communication link that was a UHF or a VHF up to the transmitter site. I know that a while back we run into kind of a hang up a bit because our bandwidth on no weather radio is about 25 kilohertz. And all of a sudden, rules come down the line that you have to cut down half your bandwidth. Now, we didn't have to cut down bandwidth on our no weather radio transmitter broadcast, but we had to cut down our bandwidth on our UHF radio feeds that we occasionally use depending on the area of the country we're in. So that kind of cut into some of our quality on that. And if you're going to notify us of problems, we certainly want to know whether this is a problem that's always been there. It may be not fixable without changing the equipment, which may be expensive for us, or if it's something you've noticed recently, and then be specific about it. We are definitely concerned about the quality of our broadcast and are willing to look into something that if we have any chance to make it better.
So if we get to quality of broadcast, is there a point person or check locally first? What if the local office doesn't really feel that there's a problem, or they feel they can't do anything technically?
Well, I would say, as Tim said, if you don't get satisfaction from your local forecast office, give him a call. But I would add, we do have an 888 number, which we offer to the public anytime that somebody notices that we go off the air and they want to report that, or any other kind of problem they notice, they can call that 888 number, which I have in front of me if you're interested, and leave a message. That 888 number goes to our national headquarters, where I'm located, and we have a staff to answer those messages. That's also the same number that the public calls to get the FIPS code for the county. So when they program their no weather radio receiver, they have an access to that without going to a computer.
Yeah. And Weather Service has sort of a three-tiered structure. We have national headquarters, we have a regional headquarters, and then the WFOs. At the regional headquarters that Dan is associated with, that's in Salt Lake City, Utah. And there are senior electronics engineers that are there. So sometimes we've had to put everybody's collective experience together, and we've had the weather forecast office, the personnel from the regional headquarters, along with folks like Wayne at national headquarters, put their experience in their heads together to try to chip away at the problem. But so if there's a problem, we want to know about it. Feel free to come to me, and then I can try to pull in the relevant, subject matter experts.
I purposely did not identify where that clip came from or who had sent it to me. But the question, of course, is, again, and as broadcasters, we often discuss how the kids think MP3s are clean audio, and we're much more sensitive to clipping, much more sensitive to overdriven audio or noise in the background that shouldn't be there. And the question becomes, is there room for improvement? Does the NWS want to clean up these audio feeds, or is it, well, there's no money for it until 2049 because we have to get off of coal?
Well, we have a variety of transmitters out there in the network. I would say at least 4 different models. And they were all designed and built in different years. Some are better than others. Some can be retrofitted, some cannot. But we are interested in doing whatever improving we can up to the limit of our resources, of course.
But can I sort of give folks the security or the comfort that there will be a response? Their letters or phone calls won't just go into the black hole.
Yes, you can take that message from here. And I'm glad you didn't mention the specific office. I was a little disappointed to hear that the response was not a good one, and that's not clearly what we strive for. So let me know.
I will leave it to the individual himself to contact you directly if he wishes, or follow up in that manner.
So I will be doing that. But I'm curious, in the bigger scope here, will the National Weather Service ever end up on IPAWS?
The answer to that question is yes. There was a large team effort on the topic of mitigating duplicate messaging, and that's the whole reason why Weather Service messages are not going to IPAWS. That report was delivered through the CISRIC group to the FCC, and we're awaiting a response from the FCC on the suggestions that were provided in that report. I don't think we can give a firm date, but the long-term plans are for messages to go to the IPAWS EAS channel. And I'll also say that in preparation for our messages to get to the IPAWS EAS channel, the use of partial county alerting will be documented in our common alerting protocol messages. So we're preparing for the future.
Cool. Another comment. I know there was a Seattle experiment with all hazards and with weather radio, repeating retransmitting some of the local EAS alerts from like emergency management. Did that ever go anywhere?
They're a unique office. I know they've taken their steps ahead of other offices. Wayne, do you have any more details on what they're doing at WFO Seattle?
They were running a program using an encoder decoder in the forecast office with a direct tap from emergency management. And they ran that for a while, but it's no longer in service. So we learned a bit with that piece of equipment there. I found it useful, but that link is no longer in service. Now, the point here is that, and you talked, Tim, you talked about Sonoma County and other places where non-weather emergency messages could in the future use partitioning. And so non-weather emergency messages would lead to that same.
Yeah, part of our effort, part of the software capability that will be employed will provide for the capability for using partial county alerting for messages like the civil emergency message. The Sonoma County emergency management officials came to us and said, hey, we want to issue in the future an evacuation warning for only part of Sonoma County, not for issuing an evacuation order for the entire county. Well, with partial county alerting, you can do that, and we're the capability will be there starting in 2023, depending upon if that's what the county wishes to do.
I think a lot of broadcasters will welcome that. I know that over the past decade or so that I've been more heavily involved in EAS, there have been some offices that have worked very closely with the local broadcasters to, well, let's face it, these gentlemen are trained as meteorologists. They're not trained as announcers. And so feedback from the field has gotten some of the folks to change the way they approach the messages and how they go out. And I think in some areas there's still room for improvement. And I'm glad to hear that this is where your intention is. Anyone else have a question, answer? Well, then I'm going to thank you guys, Tim, Wayne, Dan, Adrian. It was a real pleasure having you. I really appreciated the presentation and really what you guys are doing. As I said, I see changes in the Weather Service that are focused on being more reactive in a positive way to broadcasters. And it's not just the Weather Service. It's the emergency managers. It's the voluntary nature there against the mandated work of broadcasters. And the more that the groups can get together and discuss these things and share how each one can benefit, I think the EAS will be stronger and more effective.
Well, we appreciate your having us. Thank you for the opportunity, and please follow up with any of us if you have additional questions that you may think of.
We'll look forward to having you back one of these days and telling us about the implementation and how it's coming along.
Would be our pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.